What is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video as we're getting closer and closer to the offseason content. Well, we're already in the offseason, but I usually wait until after the Super Bowl to do my first mock draft. I'll probably start talking about Mel Kiper's mock draft and, the Daniel Jeremiah's mock draft. I'll probably do a video where I talk about all of them and the options and where these guys see the New York Giants going before I start to do my mock drafts, but really looking forward to talking about the New York Giants this offseason. And a huge topic of conversation is absolutely going to be the quarterback position. And we'll talk about that in this video, my opinion of where the New York Giants currently stand at that spot and what their options seem to be going into this offseason if you're Joe Schoen and the New York Giants. Today, I'm going to touch on what Kayvon had to say about the way that Joe Schoen handled the contracts this offseason between Saquon Barkley and Daniel Jones. I'll give my full opinion on it. Now, I think the article, and I'm going to read it in its entirety, is taken a bit out of context. Like, I don't think Kayvon was as egregious towards Daniel Jones as the article leads on, but he did come out and strongly say that he believes that the New York Giants should have signed Saquon Barkley to more than a franchise tag, which I understand. In a perfect world, it's what I wanted. And I fully understood why Saquon Barkley stood strong on his side of the fence, because he was worth more than what the New York Giants ultimately offered him coming off the year that he was. But I also understand where the New York Giants were coming from, knowing that Saquon was an integral part of the team, but he was going on 26 with an injury history. You saw another injury spike up this year at the running back position where players fall apart as they get older. So I understood where Shane was coming from too. But we'll talk about what Kayvon had to say. We'll talk about Daniel Jones, because I've been wanting to talk about this for a while in terms of my opinion of where the New York Giants stand right now in the quarterback. But I'll get to that after we dive into the event of today. Kayvon coming out. I think it was on a podcast. I actually saw the clip on it. I didn't show Bobby's clip just because it wasn't very long. It was only about 20 seconds. I wanted to get the full, all the quotes that came out from the podcast, so you kind of get all the context from it. But he was on a podcast, I think, with Carmelo Anthony, where they discussed this, and Kayvon gave his opinion on the contract of Saquon Barkley this past offseason. At the top of this article, this is taken out of context, in my opinion, but we'll read all of it. Kayvon Thibodeau is mad that the Giants cut a big check to Daniel Jones before Saquon Barkley. I suppose. I don't think he's mad that they cut, when you read this, that he's mad that they cut a check for Saquon, for Daniel Jones. He just thought that Saquon Barkley should have gotten paid because of the importance of this offense. But we'll continue to read. The Giants opted to sign the quarterback to a 4-year, $160 million contract extension last offseason and stick their running back with the dreaded franchise tag. 1 year, $10.1 million. I'll talk about in further detail, which I've done extensively before, why the Giants elected to do that. After Barkley's multi-year extension talks broke down, he played the 2023 season on the tag without creating a stink, and now his future with the Giants is uncertain as he waits to find out if he will get a multi-year extension, another franchise tag, or be allowed to test free agency. First, let's talk about why the Giants elected to do what they did. Obviously, in hindsight, the year that Daniel Jones had, he threw 2 touchdowns, guys, 6 interceptions, only looked like a very good starting quarterback for a half last year against the Arizona Cardinals. Outside of that, he was horrible. He didn't throw a touchdown outside of that one half against the Arizona Cardinals in what amounted to be about 5.5 starts. Use all the excuses that you want to, and some of them are valid. The offensive line was pitiful with Andrew Thomas out, who was by far the worst offensive line in football. Bottom line is, you paid a guy $40 million a year at the most important position on a football team, and he produced 0 touchdowns outside of 2 quarters against one of the worst teams in football in the Arizona Cardinals. The excuses wear thin, especially when you see Tyrod Taylor go out there, albeit with Thomas back in the lineup later in the year. DeVito go back out there and perform at a higher rate than what Daniel Jones did, which wasn't very hard to do. So Jones this year, whether it be due to performance on the field and the limited sample size that we saw him, albeit against good defenses, regardless, no excuses there, or the fact that he sustained another major injury, was a major disappointment this year. By no means am I saying that he lived up to the contract. But Shane was put in a spot where I think most people, most level-headed people, agreed that the Giants had to bring Daniel Jones back based off the year they had before. The question was it going to be the tag, or was it going to be a similar deal in which they signed him to? You weren't going to give him a blind faith contract like the Eagles did for Jalen Hurts or the Chargers did for Herbert, where you give him $200 to $220 million guaranteed or whatever those guys got. The Giants ended up giving him $80 million guaranteed, or a little bit over $80 million guaranteed, which in the end amounts to about 2 franchise tags when you really look at it. Last year, the franchise tag would have been 32. This year, it's projected to be closer to 40. And by signing him to the 4-year deal, which essentially has a 2-year out, it allowed you to move the money around. So rather than taking the $32 million hit last year, you took a $20 million hit. You put that $12 million on the back end in year 3 to cut him, where I think it's an extra $10 million to cut him. Rather than a 12, the extra 12 that you'd have to spend on the cap this year on the tag, it's 22, I think, to cut him year 3 if things continue to go south, which is still a good chunk of change, but $22 million in 2025 will amount to be slightly above 7% of the cap. So I understood where Shane was coming from. He wanted to be able to build the roster last year without severely damaging future cap. And yes, you could say in hindsight, we should have absolutely tagged Daniel Jones, which, yes, ideally we should have done that, because you would have been able to wipe your hands clean after this year and or had the option, I guess, to bring him back cheap if you don't want to draft a quarterback. But that also would have negatively impacted future cap, because if you were to tag Jones, well, you're clearly going to still try to compete this past season, coming off a playoff win. So you're still going to go out there. You're going to try to sign Bobby Okereke. You're going to try to sign all these players. And you're going to have to backload those contracts more than you did, because you would have had an extra 10 to 12, maybe it might have been $13 million more committed to last year's cap for Daniel Jones, meaning you would have had to backload all the contracts you were bringing in. The Andrew Thomas extension would have been further backloaded. The same could be said for Dexter Lawrence, or maybe you wouldn't have even had the opportunity to extend those guys the last offseason, which obviously was a good idea because you got them based off the 2023 rate. So no matter what he did, whether he tagged Jones or whether he signed him to a deal similar to the way in which he did, it was going to have negative implications for future cap space. In the end, I don't think it's much of a difference. Yes, you're committed to him for another year, but you have the opportunity to get out the following year. You still have just as equal of an opportunity, if you like to draft a quarterback, which we'll talk about further in this video as we continue. But I wanted to get my opinion out on that with the Daniel Jones situation, the Saquon Barkley situation. If you were to tag Barkley, it would have been a lot more committed to, I'm sorry, if you would have signed Barkley, then it would have been vice versa. You would have had $32 million against the cap for the quarterback, and you would have had more of a commitment for Saquon Barkley, a position that typically breaks down. So I understood where Shane was coming from. I think most people did. I was hoping they could meet in the middle. I said routinely, $22 to $24 million guaranteed should get it done. Reports came out that the Giants were right around 20. They never met in the middle. It is what it is. We move on. But here's what Kayvon had to say. I believe in Daniel Jones, Thibodeau said Thursday on 7 p.m. in Brooklyn with former NBA star Carmelo Anthony and the Kid Mero. What I'm mad about is that Saquon, because if you look at the game, the tape, Saquon was responsible for at least 30% of our explosive plays, talking about the year 2022 when we won the playoff game. And he's not wrong about that. And Saquon Barkley came out and basically said the same thing in so many words when asked about it during the contract disputes last offseason, when he said, I mean more to this team than I would to a lot of other teams. And he's absolutely right. Saquon Barkley was by far our best weapon in 2022, and his importance should not have been devalued. He was incredibly important to the offense for the New York Giants. It's why the Giants wanted to bring him back. The reason that they didn't want to give him a long-term commitment, fair or not, is because of the position he plays and because of his injury history. Teams around the league are not looking to sign 26, 27-year-old running backs with an injury history. It's just the truth. Fair or not. I would have liked to get a deal done, but that's why the Giants were only willing to go so far. Then he goes on to say, so for me and for the integrity of working together and hard work, and we all believe in the same things, I feel like Saquon should have got paid first. That's what I feel. And that's fair. But what I'll say to that, the Giants tried to pay Saquon first. And that was what I always thought Joe Shane's plan was to sign Saquon and tag Jones. But when he was unable to sign Saquon, who he went to in season last year, he could only tag one of them, and he knew coming off a playoff win, he more than likely had to keep both. Because if you were going to keep Daniel Jones, which he clearly had to do, he needed help. He had the worst weapons in football last year at the wide receiver position, or among the worst. I'm talking about 2022, by the way, not 2023. You want to nitpick and say there was a team or two, sure, but then you take Saquon off of that, and you're leaving the guy that you just paid a boatload of money, not much to work with. So I think Shane always knew he was if he intended to try to build off the year before, which he was kind of forced into doing, he was going to have to probably try to keep both. And when Barkley was unwilling to sign the deal that Shane thought was fair, he went and signed Jones. So it's not like he didn't try to sign Saquon first. They couldn't come to a common agreement. Let's continue. Barkley has no shortage of supporters in the locker room, where his leadership production is the team's best offensive playmaker 6 years running, and impact in the community as a two-time Walter Payton Man of the Year nominee carries respect. Thibodeau emerged as the Giants' best pass rusher in his second NFL season, but still is 1 season away from being able to negotiate a new contract. The Giants have used Barkley's injury history, 3 missed games in 2023, and the league-wide devaluation of running backs as leverage in negotiations, as would every other team in the NFL. As would every other team in the NFL. So I know Ryan Dunleavy, because he's notorious for doing this on Twitter, is going to paint the Giants as a villain in this circumstance. He's very pro Barkley, as am I. I love Barkley. But every team in the NFL would try to use leverage. That's what good general managers do. Then we're going to continue to see what he said. Kayvon said, I don't know the back end. Maybe it's a franchise tag. Maybe it's an extension. Maybe it's blah, 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 said Thibodeau, who expressed confidence in the front office's roster-building ability through the draft. That's none of my business. I have to focus on me, because we see it as a team. We know who's putting in work and not. In addition to totaling 1,200, and he just goes, continues to go on and talk about, Kayvon Thibodeau. This was another quote that came out from Tommy DeVito. I want them to call the Brinks truck and come drop off the cash at the front door, DeVito told Complex.com during a joint interview with Barkley. So DeVito also backed him up, as he should. He's his teammate. And Barkley was a guy that really supported DeVito while he was there as the quarterback. Do I think that was a slight on Daniel Jones, what Kayvon said? Not really. I think it was more so Kayvon saying Saquon deserved to get paid too. And he did. It didn't work out. Now, before I give my opinion on the quarterback position, let's tie this Saquon Barkley thing up in a bow. Here's where I think the Giants stand on Saquon Barkley. If you're the Giants, and last offseason, and I understand it was a different circumstance, you had both the quarterback and the running back becoming free agents in the same offseason. So there was a lot that Joe Schoen was working with. You don't have a quarterback contract to deal with this offseason. But if you're Joe Schoen, and last year you valued Saquon Barkley at about $19.5 to $20 million guaranteed by all reports, why in the world would you up what you feel he was worth this year? Saquon's great. Saquon's still great. He's one of the top 5 running backs in football. But if that's where he valued him last year, Saquon is now a year older at a position that historically breaks down around 29 years old. He doesn't have the pressure of having a good year like he did the previous year, where a lot of times players are able to create leverage because of that. You look at Ezekiel Elliott with the Dallas Cowboys. He held out. The Cowboys knew that they were in a Super Bowl window. They felt like they had to give him a big contract. There's no pressure from that standpoint. A lot of fans in this fan base want the Giants to completely reset. So there's no pressure from that standpoint. Saquon is coming off a worse year than the year before. Probably not his fault. The offensive line was abysmal. We had a revolving door at the quarterback position. But regardless, he's coming off a worse year. He got hurt again. He didn't stay completely healthy like he did the year before. So if you're Joe Schoen, the way I look at it is, why would I value him more than I did the offseason before that, being that he's a year older? So I don't see it happening, guys. Maybe they tag him, but I don't think so. I think in the end, the Giants last year drafted Eric Gray. I think they'll probably draft another running back this year. And I think the Giants are going to let Saquon Barkley test the market. What will Saquon Barkley's market be? I don't know. But when obviously there's 15 to 20 teams potentially bidding on your services, or whoever has the amount of cap space to be able to bid for your services this offseason, all you need is one team that feels that Saquon Barkley is the final piece to put them over the top, whether it be a team like the Baltimore Ravens or whoever. And that's why players in free agency sometimes get vastly overpaid. See Nate Solder, so many other examples. I just say Solder because he was a Giant. So I wouldn't be stunned if Saquon Barkley got a big deal. But I don't think Barkley's market is going to be astronomical. And if I'm the Giants, I let Barkley test the market. And if he's able to get a deal like that, congratulations, man. We love you. You're a great Giant. We wish you could play out your career here. When you do retire, you come back, you sign a day contract, and hopefully you retire as a Giant. We have nothing but love for you. Congratulations, and we wish you nothing but the best. But the Giants are not in a place to give Saquon Barkley the deal that he wants at this point in time. And if I were the Giants, I probably wouldn't want to commit $12 million towards this year's cap when we're approaching around, I think around 25 or 30 right now. There's things they could do, and I'll talk about that in a cap video as well. But if I'm the Giants, I let Barkley test the market. And if he's able to get a mega deal or a deal that, approaching 3 years for $40 million or probably something around there is what he's looking for. Congratulations, man. If he's able to come back here on something that is more affordable and more in line with what the New York Giants think is his value at this point in time for this specific team, I'd love to have him back. I think he's still incredibly important for this team. But that's what I would do if I were the Giants. This offseason, I would let Saquon Barkley test the market. And if he's not able to get a mega deal, I would love to have him back with the New York Giants. But if he is, you wish him the best. And thinking about it from Saquon Barkley's perspective, since he's been a New York Giant, he has experienced nothing but losing. You have a quarterback who he clearly loves. He's great friends with Daniel Jones. But you have a quarterback who has proven to this point that he can't stay on the field on a consistent basis year in and year out. You have a team that's coming off a 5-win season, a 6-win season. They've made the playoffs once since you've been here. You may have 3 good years left if you're lucky. Hopefully more, but historically speaking, at that position, you may have 3 good years left. I'm trying to win a crown. I'm trying to win a championship if I'm Saquon Barkley. Outside of the draw of saying I got to play start to finish as a New York Giant, if I'm Barkley, I think it makes more sense to try to play elsewhere. And ultimately, this offseason, that's what I think is going to happen. I think he's going to sign somewhere else. I think another team will be willing to give him a decent contract, and he will be put in a position that gives him an opportunity to compete and win a Super Bowl. But we'll see how it plays out. I hope he's back, but I hope he's back for the right price. That's what I say about a lot of players. He's my favorite player in the team, but that's where I think we're headed. As far as Daniel Jones goes and the quarterback position, this is my outlook on it. Joe Schoen intentionally signed Daniel Jones to the type of contract that he did. He intentionally had a, what I call, for lack of a better term, a balloon year in year 2. And when I say that, I mean, he spiked the cap hit in year 2. $47 million guaranteed, a $47 million cap hit next year out of a guaranteed contract where it was, I think it was like 82 or 85 or whatever it was in terms of guaranteed money towards Daniel Jones. More than half of it is in year 2. The reason he did that was simple. If something like last year were to happen, you get a clear out after year 2. You're able to wipe your hands clean, and you can get out of the Daniel Jones contract. That's why he made that contract the way that he did. And last year, everything went wrong. So if you're Joe Schoen, you're not touching the Daniel Jones contract. Had he had a really good year, the other option he would have had would be to space that money out. Okay, we believe more in you now. We have more confidence in you now. I'm willing to commit a third year to you now. They're not going to do that. So Schoen showed you from the jump, well, he did believe in Daniel Jones. He didn't believe in him enough to give him the keys to the car. He believed in him enough to give it a test ride and to see where it goes, which he didn't even believe in him enough to give him a test ride his first year with the New York Giants when he didn't sign him to a $20 million extension. So ultimately, if you're Joe Schoen in this draft, and I'm not saying they need to take a quarterback. I'm going to talk more about it. But you have to at least explore trade-up opportunities at the quarterback position. You have to at least explore it. You don't know when you're going to be picking this early in the draft again. And if you are, you don't know if that draft is going to have as potentially, because it's always potentially as strong as quarterback prospects as this draft does. And all you got to do is go back and look at Joe Schoen's first year. Let's be honest. If this same quarterback class was in the first draft in 2022 when Joe Schoen took the job, Daniel Jones wouldn't be here anymore. Giants didn't extend him on the 5th-year option, but they couldn't draft a quarterback with pick 5 and 7 because the best quarterback in the draft was Kenny Pickett, who can't even start for the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's why the Giants punted the position. So you don't know when you're going to be given this opportunity again. But at the same time, if you're Joe Schoen, you can't force a quarterback pick, no matter how much pressure is coming from the fan base. And you can't force teams to trade down with you. But if the Giants identify one of these guys, whether it be Drake May or Jaden Daniels, or, of course, Caleb Williams, who I think is going to be the first pick, I don't buy any of the nonsense coming out of the Chicago Bears camp. I think they're staying at 1, and I think they're taking Caleb Williams. But if the Giants have the opportunity to trade up and get one of those quarterbacks, Joe Schoen has to think long and hard about it, because ultimately his job is going to rest on the quarterback. Look around the league. Look at the teams who consistently compete to win Super Bowls. And there's a lot more that goes into it than the quarterback position. All you got to do is look at the 49ers. Brock Purdy, I actually think he's better than some people give him credit for. But Would he be nearly as successful if he were somewhere else? No. He's got a great team around him. Jalen Hurts. Look what happened to him this year when the Eagles team started to fall apart this year. Doesn't look quite as hot as he once did. But look around the league. Look at the teams who consistently compete to win Super Bowls. The Kansas City Chiefs, the Buffalo Bills, even though they haven't made a Super Bowl yet, they're always in the mix. The Baltimore Ravens, the Bengals when Joe Burrow is healthy. What do they all have in common? They have upper echelon quarterbacks. Now, quarterbacks can't do it by themselves. Everybody raves about Justin Herbert, hasn't had a playoff win. Everybody raves about Trevor Lawrence. He has one playoff win. You need a mix of both, but you can't get there consistently or expect to consistently compete for Super Bowls, especially in today's day and age, without an upper echelon quarterback. And I think Joe Schoen has shown you that he's not sure if Daniel Jones is an upper echelon quarterback. He's shown you that he may think he will be, and he's going to tell you all the correct things from a PR standpoint, but money talks. He didn't give him $200 million guaranteed like these other teams did for these other players. He didn't give him the fifth-year option the first year that he took this job. He was forced to keep Daniel Jones. Now, he gave him more of a commitment than he was forced to, but he was forced to keep Daniel Jones, put in the circumstance that he was. And if he feels one of these quarterbacks in this draft have the ability to potentially be one of those upper echelon quarterbacks, and he has the opportunity to do it, he's got to take the swing. But on the opposite end of the spectrum, Joe Schoen has shown you that he will not force a quarterback pick. No matter how much the fan base may cry about Malik Willis, no matter how much the fan base may cry about, taking a quarterback in last year's draft, he has shown you he will not force a quarterback pick, which gives me confidence that Joe Schoen isn't going to just take a quarterback to take a quarterback. And I know a lot of fans want them to take a quarterback no matter what. They want hope. Daniel Jones right now does not present a lot of hope. Guy can't stay on the field. He stayed healthy once his entire career from start to finish in a single season. And when he's on the field, he hasn't necessarily, he hasn't been incredible. I will continue to say, I thought in 2022, Daniel Jones had a very good year, all things considered. But he's never been an elite quarterback. And if you have the opportunity to improve the most important position in football, when you don't know if you'll get that opportunity again, you got to take it. But at the same token, you cannot force a quarterback pick. So if you're Schoen and you don't love Michael Penix, or you don't love J.J. McCarthy, or you don't love Jaden Daniels, you don't take a quarterback, and I don't expect them to. In the end, what do I think is going to happen? I think we're standing pat. I don't think we're going to be able to trade up because the Patriots need a quarterback. Washington needs a quarterback. And like I said, I ain't buying the Chicago Bears rumors about potentially keeping Justin Fields. Because when you look at what Ryan Poles did last year, he passed up on the opportunity to draft C.J. Stroud. C.J. Stroud right now looks like one of the top 3, 4, or at least potentially one of the top 3, 4, 5, 6 quarterbacks in the league after his rookie year. Had arguably the greatest rookie season in the history of the NFL. Now you're going to bypass the opportunity to take Caleb Williams or potentially Drake May, and whoever, if any one of those two guys turns out to be an elite quarterback, people are always going to have to play the what-if game. Ryan Poles didn't draft Justin Fields. I will believe it when I see it. I think he's going to take Caleb Williams. I think he trades Justin Fields. So if I believe that, I think the top 3 quarterbacks are going to be off the board. And I don't see Joe Schoen taking the 4th quarterback with the 6th pick. And at that point, I think we're going to go wide receiver. That's where I'm at. Could go a variety of ways, but that's where I'm at right now. And I think the Giants probably going to next year with Daniel Jones as the starting quarterback. That's not to say the unchallenged starting quarterback. I don't think he's getting the red carpet rolled out for him, right? At the end of the day, there's no real commitment to him past next year. If Jones stinks up the joint 2, 3, 4 weeks in, I do think the Giants will have a relatively quick hook. And I think the Giants, if they're not drafting a first-round quarterback, more than likely will sign a very good backup. Whether that means bringing back Tyrod Taylor, who could make sense, familiar with the offense, or bringing in somebody else. You know, people have brought up Ryan Tannehill, Joe Flacco, guys that have been good backup quarterbacks. But I don't think he'll be unchallenged. I think he'll be the starter, but you got to bring in somebody that's good, that can help you win games, especially like Joe Schoen has said countless times in these interviews, without the you don't know if Daniel Jones is going to be able to suit up week 1. So if we're not drafting a quarterback in the first round, I think we're going to sign a very good backup. Maybe a guy like Minshew, for example, who actually looked really good this year for the Colts. We'll see how it plays out, and I think free agency will tell us a whole lot. You have to think if the Giants spend pretty good money on a backup quarterback, that's at least a relatively strong indicator that they're not going to be drafting a quarterback with one of their first 6 picks. Not to say it's impossible. Certainly is. But I think if the Giants are drafting a quarterback early in this year's draft, they're going to be trading up to do it. The question will be, will one of those teams in the first 3 spots be willing to move out of the pick, or will Joe Shane love a quarterback enough that is the 4th quarterback on most people's boards to take at 6th overall? Crazier things have happened. Giants took Daniel Jones 6th. Most people didn't see that coming. I didn't. So we'll have to wait and see how it all plays out. But in the end, I think Jones is back, but I think he's back on a shorter leash. And I do think at some point, Joe Shane is going to address the quarterback position. I just don't know if it'll be in the draft this year. We'll have to wait and see. Going back to what Kayvon had to say, probably not the best of ideas. Coming out and saying that, basically saying your general manager, in your opinion, made a mistake. And I get it. It's the world we live in with podcasts, and I get it. But Joe Shane, at the end of the day, is going to be the guy that negotiates your contract. Probably not the best idea to come out and say that. Still love Kayvon, but probably not the best of ideas. As always, guys, if you liked what you watched, please subscribe. Drop a comment. Maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.